Xin chào mọi người. Hôm nay mình có beeman với mình. So beeman, you want to say hi real quick, and then I'm
Ciao
gonna jump into the
Boy
opening.
Ciao Boy Angular Vietnam.
Cảm ơn. Great Vietnamese, by the way. So xin chào mọi người. Thì hôm nay là stream giữa mình và beeman. Thì beeman sẽ walk mình through the PANG Stack. I should have put something else here, but anyway. So beeman sẽ dẫn dắt mình qua cái PANG Stack. PANG Stack là Prisma, Angular, Nest, NX và GraphQL. Thì rule của cái buổi stream hôm nay thì mình cũng muốn nhắc lại với mọi người là mình sẽ stream bằng tiếng Anh, và mình vẫn sẽ đọc câu hỏi bằng tiếng Việt và bằng tiếng Anh luôn. Vì hôm nay mình có guest là beeman là nói tiếng Anh, cho nên là toàn bộ buổi stream sẽ cố gắng là bằng tiếng Anh nhiều nhất có thể. Thì mình muốn thông báo bằng tiếng Việt trước khi vào stream như vậy cho mọi người. Thì bây giờ chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu thôi. So let's get started. Today we have beeman or Bram. So you want to introduce yourself to the viewer?
Sure. My name is beeman or Bram. I'm from the Netherlands. I live in Colombia. I've been a software engineer for more than 10 years professionally, and I recently created this stack that we're going to talk about today. Or I didn't create it; I put it together after having worked with it for a few years.
Yeah, pretty cool. I've seen the stack a couple of times. I've seen a couple of stream beeman introducing this stack, and I'd love to learn more about it.
Very good. Let's go. Yeah, I love to share it with all of you. And if anybody wants to, follow me on Twitter. You can ask questions. I'm also in the Angular Discord, so if somebody's interested there, we can talk about all of the topics in the Angular Discord as well.
Yep. So Angular Discord is what? Discord?
.gg/Angular.
Discord.gg/Angular. All right. So the Discord is the discord.gg/Angular. I know we Angular Vietnam has our Discord, but we do not active much on that Discord. But if you're interested in any kind of discussion around Angular, any update around Angular, feel free to join the Angular Discord. Hi Tip. So lập trình thật kỳ diệu is Tifan, the GD.
Very cool.
All right, so before we get into the code, and before beeman walks me through the PANG stack, I'm going to show you what we wanted to build, but I didn't really have time to work on the front end for this demo. So I'm going to show you the front end real quick, then we're going to jump in the GraphQL and Prisma setups thing.
Yeah.
All right, so you have the login screen here, but if you go to try to go to the
gonna share screen.
I forgot to share my screen. Share my screen. Share screen. Screen one. There we go. All right, you guys see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. So if you go to just an NX application, NX workspace with Angular and Nest.js application, if you go to the home page, try to redirect you to the sign-in page if you don't have any authentication token. And I'm going to log in with my username, sign in. Then it's going to redirect you to the post, and this is what we're going to build, like posts and comments. And you can toggle the like, or you can post a comment, hey, submit, and it will update that as well. All right, so that's all we're gonna have to we're gonna build today. Hopefully I can have the front end working and looking good for the demo after the stream. If not, it's gonna have to be next week. All right. So,
but basically a very simple social network, right?
Yep, very simple social network.
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk people through the structure that I have prepared real quick. So I created an NX workspace with Angular and Nest.js. So I have a libs, an apps with the API, which is the Nest.js API, which is empty, and we're gonna have beeman fill this up for us. And then I have a demo, which is the front end. And in the libs, I have the demo, which I have a couple of feature module like auth, post, and shell without any UI, by the way. Right, and that's it. So let's get started.
Okay, perfect. So I think we want to quickly go to prisma.io to check out the website.
Yep.
So Prisma is what we will be using for data layer. And if you have built apps with Node.js in the past, you most likely use something like TypeORM or Mongoose or Sequelize to do your data layer. Or maybe you use Prisma as well. Prisma is an alternative for that data layer. And it works in a different way because it has a schema as a source of truth. So I think if you scroll down a little bit here, you can see here the instructions on how to install it, but we will go over this. But here you can see the schema. And this schema on the right-hand side here, this defines where the data is stored. So that's the data source, what code it will generate, and we will get into that in a little bit. And it defines all of your posts and your relationship.
Okay.
So if you can quickly move over back to the demo that you have in the that you showed initially, the UI.
Yep. Let me get back to that real quick here. Set fly, and let's go to the demo.
So very, very brief about data modeling. So the goal of data modeling is to look at the data you want to represent to your app and make sure that they have an identity or a model. So if we look at the app right here, we can already see we have one important one, which is user. You see nartc here as the user. It has an avatar and a name. And you see a post. That's another one we can identify.
Yep.
Yep, you have a data structure here. So each post has an author. And then each post has comments. So we can identify in this layout already we can identify 3 models. And this is what we're going to model in Prisma. So we're going to have user, which has multiple posts. It's an author of one post. And the comment has 2 relationships, one to the user, who is the author of the comment, and one to the post on which it's commenting. So this is what we will build today. And I think, data modeling, we can do a separate video of 2 hours specifically for that. So let's not go into deep into this. But this is the goal of Prisma. We make a data model in our head, or we write it down, and then we model it in Prisma. And after that, we can use it inside our Node.js app.
Okay.
So this is pretty well documented. It's all in English at this point, but it should be fairly straightforward. They have a lot of good examples. I think we can take the comment that is up there above that installs the Prisma CLI. So that's the first comment they share. The first command they share. There you go. So we can say npm install Prisma CLI -d. Install it as a dev dependency.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably want to bump up this terminal a bit. Yep, awesome. So Prisma, when you install it, comes with 2 parts. One is the Prisma CLI, and this is a dev dependency that we use to create the schema and make updates from our schema into the database. And the second part is the Prisma client, which is a runtime dependency.
All right.
But
so
for now, this is
yeah.
So because it's installed locally in your project, you can use npx to run the Prisma from the Node module. So you can say npx Prisma and run init to initialize a new project.
Alrighty.
And this will create, if you look at git status, you will see that there's 2 things that are created. A .env file, which is in pink, which is our environment file. And they started out a basic Prisma schema.
Okay.
And let's first take a quick look at the .env file, because maybe not everybody is aware of how this works, but we configure. Let me go
to the code.
Yeah, let's open it here. So we configure Prisma by setting an environment variable, and in order for us not to set it all the time in development, to prefix our command with all of these things, we have a .env file. So what we want to do here is tell our Prisma setup where the database lives and what credentials you have. Now, what I generally do is run my database in Docker during development. So this might be a good moment to look at getting Postgres started. So for this demo, we're going to use Postgres as a demo. We can do two things. I can give you a link on an example that I've been using.
Yep.
Or we can write, yep, that's easiest. Let me quickly grab one.
Hi, Connie. As Connie says, hi.
Hey, Connie. Hi, hey. Okay, I'm going to quickly get this Docker Compose for us.
Yep.
And okay, so in order for this to work, you of course need Docker. So this is one of the things. And share it, but I need to make sure I don't share too much. Yes, this looks good. So I'm going to share it here in the private chat. So with this file that I just shared, it's called a docker compose.yaml.
So it's going to be in the root directory?
Correct. Yeah. So we're going to create a new file here, docker-compose.yaml. And we're going to paste this in. And what we do here is we say, okay, Docker, give us a service called Postgres. So on line 3, it downloads the image Postgres. And I hope you already downloaded this, because otherwise we have to wait a little bit. That's also fine.
Oh,
actually,
I have not.
Yeah, I have not. Okay, let's start it, and then we can run over it. So in order to run this file, and you can actually get rid of line 13 and 14, because we don't use the Docker volumes. But rather here on line 12, we say in the temp directory, create a Postgres folder. This makes it very easy for one project to say, okay, I just want to get rid of my Postgres data, just get rid of the temp folder, and then it cleans it all up.
All right, so I'm going to run this Docker Compose up.
Correct, Docker Compose -up, and this should, yep, and this will now pull in Postgres. Right. Yep, it's going to download it in a little bit. Now this seems like this is very fast, so that's good.
Yay!
You have a good connection here.
US internet.
Yes, very good. I'm jealous. Very cool. Now this will start a new Postgres service, so it's completely empty, right? And if you switch back to the editor real quick, you see in TMP got now created a folder called TMP, and inside there you have Postgres, and this is the raw Postgres storage. I don't generally touch this, but it's nice to have access to it if you want to debug. But more often, it's super quick to just delete your database and start over again. So if you want to have a fresh start, this is the way to go.
Yep.
Now, last thing for this file, on line 8, 9, and 10, we tell it our initial database is called Prisma, the user is called Prisma, and the password is called Prisma. All super boring, super predictable. These are the values we need to update in our .env file.
Oh, all right. I'm going to copy that.
Yeah. So here, what we say in line 7 is, here with John Doe is the username. We're going to change that for Prisma. Random password is going to be set to Prisma. Localhost and port 5432 stay the same. And then MyDB is also Prisma. And then for the schema, you can, if you like, you can give an own name. Maybe social network, maybe Angular Vietnam, or you can leave it public.
Yeah, I'm going to do Point Stream.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the schema inside Postgres database. So you can have various schemas sit next to each other. Now, for now, we don't need this env file anymore, so we can close this one, and we can close the Docker Compose because we don't really need it.
So before we move on, I'm just going to recap real quick for people that that haven't followed because of the English. So to get started, we first need to install the Postgres CLI. That is on the docs of Postgres on the the Prisma CLI. That's on the documentation on the homepage of Prisma. And after that, we get started with Postgres for this demo. So to get started with Postgres, just create a Docker Compose file and paste this in here. This means we tell Docker, hey, I want a service called Postgres with image of Postgres. This service name can be absolutely anything that you like, but the image has to be an image on the Docker Hub or your local image. And then here we tell Docker, hey, expose the port 5432 to my port to the port 5432 on my local machine. This means that if you have any UI application that want to connect to Postgres or to this instance of Postgres to view your data, then this is you have to do this. And then the environment, we set up the database, the user, and the password of Postgres. And then for volumes, we just mount the Postgres data in the Docker file to our temp folder in the root directory. And we just run Docker compose up, and we'll pull down the Postgres image, and we'll start up the Postgres database for us.
Very great summary. Can we quickly look at the terminal to see if it started? Because that's interesting. Here it should say database system is ready to accept connections. So that's the last word.
Nice.
If you see this, it's ready to go. So perfect.
So people, this is what you're looking for. Database system is ready to accept connections.
Yeah. So very cool. And then you updated it in .env. And with that, we basically told Prisma, Prisma will read this file and will look at the database URL environment variable, and it will use that to connect. And for now, we don't no longer need this file. So we can get rid of this one and close this one. And then we also created a Prisma folder with an empty schema. Now, what we see here, you can quickly go ahead and install the plugin, which gives us syntax highlighting. There we are. What we define here are two blocks. One is the data source called DB. It has a provider called Postgres, and it as a URL to the Postgres database, we use our environment variable. So this is here linking to the value we have in .env. You can call the value database URL literally anything, but this is a very common name. And for instance, on Heroku, this will just work without any configuration. So this is the exact same thing that Heroku uses. Then the second part is the generator. Now, I think we can look into the generator real quick after we created some model, but in essence, what we do, we define our schema here. So in a second, we're going to write our first schema, and Prisma will then generate a client for us that we can consume in Nest.js. So,
tip ask, should we specify a specific tag of the Docker image?
It's good practice to do so, yes. So if you build your app on like Postgres 13, which is the latest one, if you start today, I would definitely say Postgres ;13 in your image. So you make sure that you don't have any surprises if you download it at some time. So yes, it's good practice to do that. Here in development, we don't really care because we're fine with some bugs. But in production setups or in a real application, you most likely want to set a version there. Very cool. So, okay, we can start by writing our models. And if we quickly scroll back to the website, let's use that for a reference a little bit to the Prisma website, I mean. So we know we want to have a user. So let's do that one first. Now, there's a big button here that says learn more about Prisma schema. So I definitely advise you to check this page out if you're working with Prisma. So here it's all... we can go to the other tab real quick because it will tell us, okay, you have data sources, generators, and a model definition. That's basically the main 3 points here in the page. And they'll give an example. And I think we can just start by modeling this example because what they have here is a database data source, same as us. They have a generator and they have a user and a post model, and we can extend it later by adding the comment sections. So what I generally do here is I copy the first one, ID, the ID property of the user, because that's a bit hard to get right all at once to make sure that we have the right syntax.
Let's do that.
Okay, cool. So we're going to start model and define our model. We're going to call it user, and we paste in the ID. Now, and the second
is the indentation here matter?
It will format it for you. So let's do that right away. So if you go into your terminal right now, here down below, and you do npx prisma format, it will validate your file and format it. So if you then open it back up, it will paste it in. So this is something I do because format also validates it. So if you say, for instance, if you add a property here, created at, just down one line below, type in created at, but you don't specify any type. If you now run format, it will fail because it say, hey, I don't know which type is created at.
Yeah, WebStorm already say, hey, something wrong here.
Yep, syntax highlighting. And actually for WebStorm, this is a community-based plugin. So it lags a little bit, it walks a little bit behind of the VS Code integration, which is made by them. Yeah, the VS Code one it has like format on save and validation on save and red squiggly lines.
Awesome.
So let's create this created at field, and this is a field date time, if I recall correctly.
Date time.
Let's see what the formatter does if it likes this. And we will not format all of it. Yeah, but it does know it, and now you see that it indents. So the indentation doesn't really matter for how it works, but if you run Prisma format, which you should, then it will indent it correctly for you.
Yep. So it's going to put like all the properties, or I guess the columns. Yeah, all the columns, the columns in one column, and then all the type of that columns in one column.
Yep. And then the last thing. So that's a very good point. The first column here is the property name ID created at, and we will have username, email, etc. The second column is the type of field. Now, Prisma has a few basic types that you would expect: integer, string, Boolean. You can have arrays of things. You can add JSON and date time. So these are very basic ones that you'll find in most programming languages. And then I think one of the most powerful aspects of this is that you can create your own. So we can, in a bit, we will see when we add model, we will refer to it as the column type. When we can say a user have multiple posts, which is a post array.
Awesome.
So let's take a look, and I'm going to quickly open my example schema just to make sure that I'm on the right track here.
Yep.
So with the created at field, what we want to do is we want to set a default value. So what we often see is have default values here set for created at and updated at. So yes, we can add a default function or a directive, how you want to call it. And we can specify here that inside default, we want the date of now. And this is another function. So you can say now and execute it as a function. And this will make sure that whenever this record user gets created, it will set the value of created at to the current date and time. Now, same we can do for updated at. So very cool. Duplicated, updated at. We also say date, time, and now. But now we also want to make sure that this value gets updated each time record created, and we can add another directive here at the end to say add updated at. And the directive doesn't take any parameters, so we don't need the parentheses. We can just get rid of the parentheses. We can just leave it without.
Oh, that's it?
Yep.
Oh.
Cool. So, and then I think like ID, we quickly copied it in, but ID on line 14, we say that it's a field is called ID. It's an integer. And we set the at ID directive here. And this makes sure that this tells on Prisma, like this is the primary key from this user. We can uniquely identify users with this at ID property. Now, cool. Okay, so this basically is a standard setup. So what we'll see for comment and for post, we will basically copy these first three fields, and we will make sure that every model in our system starts with these three fields. So we have an auto number ID, we have created that and updated that fields. Perfect. Now, what we now can do is add the real fields. Maybe we can look at the example in the browser of the website and look at which fields you have for the author so that we map into those.
Okay. Author, I have avatar URL, I have bio, I have email, I have location, name, and username.
Perfect. Okay, so avatar URL, bio, email, location. Let's add those because I think most of them, and we can see that bio is optional here.
Yeah.
It's not set, so that's good. Something we want to probably model. I think username is uniquely identifiable, so we can only have one narc in this system. So this is something
Correct.
we want to model in the database.
Nice. Good point.
So
So
we're going to
I'm gonna
paste.
put that here.
Yeah. So let's start with username, I think. Or do you want to do alphabetic? That's also
That's
username. And this is type string.
So string?
Yep. String like this. And it's required by default. So if you want to make it optional, just like in the TypeScript type definition, you do a question mark. But if you want to have it required, you're going to leave it like this. So this is for username. We definitely want to have it required. And we're going to say that we're going to give the @unique directive. And this guarantees us that Prisma will not allow any duplicate versions of username, but it will set this at the database level. So it's not Prisma making the check. It will instruct Postgres in our case, and will make sure that Postgres doesn't allow unique values. It basically sets a unique constraint on this field. Now then, name, I think, or we can do both. We can continue with alphabetical order. I tend to have my unique and special fields up, and then go from more important to less important. So let's say name, or email. Yep, email is a very good one. String, and email is often something you want unique as well. So you cannot create the same user with the same. Yeah, perfect. Now the other ones I think are super straightforward. So name, which is a string, and you can make this optional if you like. So we can provide a default for in GraphQL later on. We can provide a default, a fallback to username. So let's add a question mark here. Then location, bio, and avatar URL I think are all optional strings.
Yep.
So very cool, and we can get rid of all this, run Prisma format quickly, and that will format it all out for us. Cool, so we have no errors. We defined our user model. I think we can go ahead and actually inform our database that this is the schema we want to work with. So we now have a schema.
We have some question. We have some question here. So tip asks, I'm working with Postgres and type ORM before. How can we use enum type of a column in Prisma?
That's very good. Let's add an enum right away, because what we want to do here is give the user a role. So we can say enum role with capital R, and this takes two values. So let's say admin and user, and then we have admin and user. So this is how we define our enum. And then inside our model, we can just say property role, give it a type enum of the type role, so with the capital R, and we probably want to set a default value of user.
So just that?
Yep, just like this. And now we're going to run Prisma format, and this will format it all out, and we know it's good. So very great question. This is a very common use case for role. Also for status, you can say user is active, either active or disabled or pending. For posts, you can say, okay, I'm going to have a post status where it's either published or draft or review. So yeah, enums are a very, very commonly used item here.
So we have another question here. So we need to create schema in PostgreSQL before, or Prisma handle it for us. That means typing in the CLI and auto-generate the schema what's connected to our machine. So probably, basically, a thing he meant by schema first or code first.
This is a code first approach. So we write the schema, and this generates our changes in Postgres. So we don't need to write our own database schema, and it will generate a client. But there's one thing important to understand, and that is something I don't really work with in my demos, but you can also have Prisma introspect your existing database. So if you have an existing database in either Postgres or MySQL, you can point Prisma to this database, and it will look at the tables, and it will create this schema for you. Cool. So this is super nice if you want to migrate an existing application that you already have to Prisma.
Right. So I don't think I've worked with SQL databases that much, but I know for a fact that if you want to change something, some schema to your tables, you're going to have to write migrations one way or another. I think Prisma will handle the migration for us.
That's correct. So right now in development mode, we're going to use Prisma in development mode, and we're going to use Prisma's db push commando to push this schema to our database. But we will not do a migration. Maybe if in the end we still have time and we remember it, we can look at how a migration would work. But Prisma definitely has support for migrations, which means it keeps track of your state of your database. It will give you a SQL command that it would do to migrate, and you can tweak this. And it's a very powerful tool for doing production apps, because, for instance, let's say we have this schema and at some point we decide, okay, we don't longer want to make username unique. We cannot just delete the field because Prisma will not allow it, because we cannot just have a field with existing data being deleted. Prisma has data guarantees and it will prevent you from doing this. So in this case, what I generally do, first I get rid of the unique constraint, deploy that one. Then I run some code that makes sure that all the values, and I make it optional. That's most likely in the first place. So I make username optional. I get rid of unique flag. Then in the second, after deployment, I run some code, some custom script in my API that cleans up the username field, basically gets rid of all the values. And then lastly, we can, in another migration, we can say, okay, just get rid of the whole username field, because now it's empty and Prisma will not fight you.
Cool.
Yeah, great questions, by the way. Keep them coming. I'm super happy to ask any questions. So yes, Van's question was, do we need to create a schema in Postgres or have Prisma handle it? This is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to say in the terminal npx Prisma, and we're going to say db space push. Now, if we run db push, you can hit enter and this will run. It will give us an error message. And it says, hey, this is currently a preview feature of Prisma. So Prisma has some new features behind the preview feature flag, but we're going to use it anyway because this is one of the best things that happened in 2020. So this will, we can just do the same command again and run the -- preview feature flag. At some point in the future, we no longer need it. Cool. So now what we can do here is look at the output. And what we can see here, the third line is Postgres database Prisma schema PANG stream at localhost. So here it connects to whatever we set in the V file. And actually, it's now installing the Prisma client. We could have done this manually, but let's go to the output for a second again on the top of the terminal. Right after the DB connection string, what we can see is your database is now in sync with your schema. So after running db push, Prisma db push, it will bring our schema in sync. If we now run it a second time, it will say your database is already in sync. So it will know that there's no changes and it will not do anything. So this is an operation. We also see it generated a Prisma client into Node modules. And this is actually the thing that we're going to use. So Prisma does something that might feel weird if it's new, but it does generate a client for you. It just generates code inside Node modules. So if we look in the project and we look in the file bar, in sidebar Node modules, we can look at Prisma client. Well, there's a .prisma folder. We can look at the @prisma folder here, and there's a client. And if we look at index.js here, you will see that it will, on line 1, it will require .prisma.client. So it will require a Node.js package called .prisma.client. So we can look into this one. I think you can comment click into it. Yep. Now, and if you search here for instance, avatar URL, which is one of the fields we have defined, yeah, we can see that this got generated by us for Prisma, by Prisma. So when you work with Prisma, you don't need to write a lot of these things yourself in order to just use them. We can already use this. We can import this user, and we just have a type which exactly matches the shape of whatever we put inside the Prisma schema. And you can also, if you just search for this file for post, you see that there's no post here available.
Right.
Yeah, this doesn't exist. If we now add the post model in our schema and we run Prisma db push again, we shall see that it works. So let's do that. Let's add post. And I copy over the first tree. Yep, very good. Now let's maybe you want to quickly scroll back to the application you have in the browser, so we can take a look at the schema you used. Maybe you can bump up the DevTools here a little bit. Awesome. So the one post here, we have the author with the comments. We have the text, which is probably the most important one, which is the text of the post.
Yep.
Updated at ID, created at, and then we have the comment counter, liked by count and liked by. I think we might want to start simple, just have a text and author, and then look at the other likes and the comments down
Let's
the line.
do that. Yep. So
text is a string, and it will be required.
Now we have author.
We have author, and author is of type user. So we can use the model we have on line 13 here. And this we need to specify with a directive. So we can say at relation. And the first parameter here is a string with double quotes. And we can give this relationship a name. And I really like to use the database conventions. So for instance, user underscore has many underscore post.
Is that?
Yeah, I use caps for user and I use caps for the has many, the M there. So I use like a camel case has many posts. Now this doesn't really do anything. You can literally do whatever you want, but I really like this naming because it makes sense to read, hey, what is my relation about? Now, the second thing we want to add, we want to add two more parameters in the relationship directive. One of them is called fields. And this in fields, it's an array. So you can just add fields without any parameters. So it's fields, semicolon, and then the empty array. So you can just pass in the word fields here, semicolon, empty array. And references, which is comma. So you can do a comma, references, and this is also an array. Now, first one, the fields we want to have on our local post model to represent the author, and this is going to be author ID. So we're going to say, and you don't need a string for this one. So this is all, it will all understand it. Author ID. Now the author ID on post really doesn't exist yet, so we'll do that in a second. But our idea is that the plan here is to have an author ID field that references to the user ID field. So in the references field, we're going to specify on the user model which key do we want to uniquely identify to? And in this case, it's ID of line 14. So we're going to link up things by ID. Now, in order to make this happy, we need to go add a new line here and add the author ID field because it's not there yet. So we have author ID, and this will be the same type as the ID field we reference to. So that's an int. Very good. And this, now we can run format here. And what this will do, format, and this is one of the reasons you want to run this often, it will create the other side of the relationship. So if we now scroll back, you see on line 24, the other side of the relationship got added. So Prisma is smart enough that it knows, okay, if you have a relationship on one side, you also want to model this on the other side.
Okay.
One small thing here that I always change on line 24, the property is now called post with a capital. I think it's better to have this posts with a small p and plural, because that basically gives us a more descriptive name of whatever we're doing.
All right.
And these relationships come in super handy down the line. So we can use these relationships basically to make very complicated queries. But I think we want to run it one more time just to make sure that post is properly formatted. And now the second thing is Prisma. There you go. It's properly formatted. And now we do a Prisma schema, DB schema push again. So we're going to push this to the database, and then if we open up our .prisma client file here, and we now search for post, we should see that, there you go, model post got created. Now, this is all auto-generated for us. This is very nice, I think, because if Prisma makes changes to their code and they improve how they handle their models or anything, you will get this for free. So you don't need to manage this. We are going to duplicate it a little bit down the line, but there's tools around this, but we're going to do it all manually. Now, for now, this is kind of nice. We did it, but let's bring it in use. And I think one of the great things of Prisma, and I think you haven't, maybe even haven't seen this, Chow, because I didn't demo it before, is the Prisma Studio. I don't think you have seen Prisma Studio in one of my things. Very good.
No,
Okay.
I have not.
Very good. So let's run Prisma Studio.
So right here, Prisma Studio.
npx Prisma Studio. Yep. And this will download a new app, and it will give you the models that we defined. So we can say, okay, user. Let's get to user. Yep. And this gives you basically a database view of your user. So what we can do here, if we like, is add a record. And let's just add email, a username and email, because the rest will be auto generated. So, yep, create your own email, username. Here you can say, oh, this is a little bug. I think you have to click out of the...
Okay.
Yeah. But we can set user here. We can set avatar URL. We can set name or location, but we can also leave it blank. That's...
I'm going to give this one my avatar. Yeah,
yep, very good. Okay, cool. So this is user, and you can save the change, and now it will create it in the database. If you hit the little plus sign on the top here, next to the user tab, and you can say open post. If you now want to create a post and add a record, you will see that it will know that this user got created here in the user field. So you can click here on user, and this will give you a box where you can select a relationship. So if the only thing you want to do is add a few fields or a few records in the database for quick editing or quick debugging, this is the fastest way. So yeah, you need to have a text because it's required first post, and you save change. And this now gets stored in your database. So we now have one user with one post.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, this super powerful tool, and it's really
super
nice because it's not
cool.
And the beauty is, I think, it's not tied to Postgres or MySQL or SQLite. It's a generic database editor which works with whatever works Prisma.
Nice. All right, so we have some questions here. Yeah. So first one is from Connie. Connie asks, if updating DB schema requires data patching, how does Prisma handle it? I can add SQL statement to type ORM migration script after it is generated.
At this moment, Prisma migration only handles data structure, so it doesn't handle actual data. So what I find myself doing is making sure I have a Prisma schema migration that's not destructive, so it will apply without any issues, which I told before. Do it in multiple steps. First, mark a field unique or something, and then get rid of the values. Or the other way around, if you want to make some field unique, first you make sure in your code that you have some scripts that make sure that all the fields are unique, and afterwards you can set it in the database. So currently they don't provide it. Prisma Migrate is still in beta, and they might add it in the future, but for now, these are two separate things.
All right. Next one is Tib again. Can we have a base schema for those 3 columns, and other schemas will expand it?
No, and this is definitely something that we would love to see, but for now it's copy-paste, sadly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one is Vaughn asked, how we assign recursive on one table in Prisma?
So is Bram talking about a recursive relationship here?
I think it's like a user can have friends of type user.
Yeah, this is something that's explained in the Prisma documentation. So that might be a good thing to quickly look at. If there's this tab, schema reference. Now there you go, relationships. This is the thing. Here we have, yes, we have a ton of relationships explained. This is all the types you ever want to need. But what you can do here is you can have one-to-one relationships. So a user here will be able to designate his successor, and we can see which are the predecessor. I don't really think it's a great example. I would love to see parent and child. I think that's the best example for modeling relation. Yep. But you can definitely do it. And it's not anything new than what we already handled. It's basically defining the same thing on the model, and it will do the right thing.
Okay, I'm gonna put it here in the chat for people.
Yeah. This document is super important if you want to do relationships. So definitely check out the examples here. Everything that I ever needed is here. You can do some pretty complicated stuff in an easy way.
All right.
Awesome. So we now have our Prisma schema defined. We have our two models. We even have some sample data in there, and we didn't really do a lot of coding yet. So
Yep.
I think we can go ahead and start actually using this.
Yep.
Now, in our structure that we have for Nest.js and in the PANG stack, we divide our libraries in a certain way. So we have feature libraries and data access libraries, etc. And these are things we all can generate right here in libs. So I think we should call we should have a API library. So this is what it's going to be, Nest library. Yep. It's going to be part of the API. And in my example, which is a simple one, so we have Nest.js library. So what we can do is either call it the core data access library, or just do core data access. So that's basically something we extend upon. Or we can just, if it's very simple, we can just call it data access and have just all data access.
Call it data access in here.
Yeah, data access. So the directory will be API. And I think we can leave all the others one. Let's just add a service if it already can include a service.
I'm going to add this one because I have trouble with this one. So I'm going to do instead of like doing, so the import path that NX generate for us will be /API. But because it has some issue with like trying to import apps or something like that, there's a test lint or lint error saying import apps or non like boundary and stuff like that around the naming. So I'm going to do this and then put data access.
Okay, and we want to check the service box, so it creates a service. And I think the rest of it,
I'm going to not do testing. So
yep,
that's it.
Let's run it. Let's make sure that this works. So inside this library is where we're going to abstract Prisma out. So the goal is here to have a service that we can inject in Nest so that we don't have to import from @Prisma client in any of our apps. And this way we basically delegate all the work to our data access library, which is just created. And this basically future-proofs us, because if at some point we're not happy with Prisma and we want to change our app to something like Mongoose or SQLize or TypoRAM, we have to re-implement our API data access module, and we should be good. So
okay. Just want to quick point out that again, we're using NX, and I'm using an NX plugin with WebStorm. You can generate this library with a CLI, or you can use, if you use VS Code, that an NX plugin or NX console, even better than the NX plugin here in VS Code. So feel free to use that.
Yeah, very good point. Now we have a data access module, and inside source lib, we have created a service. So this is a standard Nest.js setup module. And what we're going to do here is inside this service, we're going to handle our Prisma client. So the way to do this, there are several ways to do this, but in Nest.js, it makes a lot of sense to say here that the API data access service extends Prisma client. So we're going to say here extends Prisma client. There you go. Now this should be imported from @Prisma client.
It doesn't. Oh, there we go.
Okay,
just slow. Just slow on my part. There we go. Prisma client.
Yeah, but we shouldn't have the scripts. I'm not sure why this gets added. So, but this Prisma client. Now, what we want to do, two more things, and this might be new for some people, but we can use the onModule init and onModule destroy lifecycle hooks. So we can say implements onModule init and onModule destroy. And this means we need to implement these two members. So we now have the onModule destroy and onModule init. Now let's start with the init, because that's more logical. What we want to say here is this.connect. There you go. This.$connect. Yes. And on the model destroy, we want to say this.disconnect. And we want to await both of these, because these are, so these are async, and then these are await, and they have promise void as a return type. Very good. And because we're extending Prisma client, we also want to add a constructor, and we want to call super on the in the constructor. There you go. So this is the basic setup. Now we have cleanly abstracted Prisma client, and we can do two things that I often use. One is we can create helper methods in this API data access service for common operations. For instance, find a user by username. This is something we're definitely going to use in our app. So we're going to say find user by username. We take a username as a string, which is required. And in order to get this, we say return this.user. And this.user will be, there you go, this is generated code. And all these methods here are generated for you by the Prisma client. So this is what we just checked out. This is what gets generated in node modules.prisma/client. Find unique is the one that we want to use here. And if you add a method here, so add an object, not a method.
Object.
Yep, an object, and you can use IntelliSense, there you go, to see that there's three options. So what we're looking at here is the where.
Where?
And this takes an object. And here we can say, yeah.
I love it.
This is beautiful, right? Here it knows which are the uniquely identifiable fields. So if we can quickly open Prisma schema and we look at the user model here, we see we have three ways to uniquely identify the user. We can say the ID, which is the foreign key, but also username and email are marked as unique. So if we ever have a new field which we can use to uniquely identify the user, update it in the schema, run Prisma DB push, and all of our generated code will automatically autocomplete this stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I was actually kind of like confusing when I see like .phi and then I see phi1 and then phi unique. But then phi unique is pretty cool.
Yeah, and actually find unique is the alias for find one. It used to be called find one, but it was a bit ambiguous. So the Prisma team decided to call it find unique.
Now, and I have one quick question for you. So when we say when we generate like the default schema, it gives us the provider with Prisma client JavaScript. How does it know that it gives us the provider of client JavaScript? Because we run in the package.json environment.
In this case, that's just the default. But there's also a Prisma client for Go, and there's also a Prisma client for Rust. And I think the Go one is beta stage. Rust one, I'm not sure what the status is. But you can use the same model in your database in your Go applications and generate Go code and use it in a similar way.
And you can have multiple clients. Can you?
Yes, you can actually write your own generators. So what you can do is you can add a generator and call it ciao, and then inside this generator have some custom logic that receives the schema and then generates a code for you. So if there's very common stuff, let's say you want to build an admin UI, you can totally have a generator that generates, let's say, Angular code for you that maps to the field. So this is super powerful. And
this is a very cool point, people. Let's say that this client, the generator name, actually matches with the client generated in the Prisma folder right here. So let's say if you have a very complex application with multiple backend languages, and you only need to have like one Prisma schema, and you can have like this is like JavaScript client, or you can have like generator with Go client. That is going to generate that's for you.
Yeah,
very
and
cool.
you can make your own ones. So there's, for instance, a community plugin that translates this schema into valid JSON schema, which is also already a nice step. So if you want to have JSON schema generated based off Prisma, you can totally do this.
Nice. Cool.
So now we have our find user by username. So what we can quickly do is here inside the constructor, basically say this.find user by username and pass in art2 as a string, and then .then. For now, we cannot await .then, take the value and print it out. Yep. And now if we start our server, we should see the item that's created for you in the database. This is basically our check that everything works well.
Let me make sure. All right, so I have my Postgres is running. So make sure you have your Postgres running, and then we're gonna do in our start. Actually, let me use iTerm so you have a bigger. So right here in our start API.
Very cool. And this will use NX to run the API. And if all went well,
actually we haven't imported the API data access module.
Very good. So yeah, but we don't have any errors. But yes, this is not showing. We need to use this one. So we can go to the app module of our API and load it in here. And generally, data access modules are not imported directly. We import them in features, but for now, it won't hurt. So if we go to the output, and there you go, lo and behold.
Awesome.
We see our database access. So we've written a small wrapper around Prisma client, extending Prisma client, and this gives us database access. We no longer need to worry about it all. So what I think we can do, and switch gears here a little bit, is now what do we do with this data? Inside the PANG Stack, we do create GraphQL resolvers and expose this. So I think we have two nice models. We have user and we have post. We can create a database access and a data access and a feature for both, or we can just do it the more naive way and say, okay, we're going to create a post module and a user module, just basically a simplified version. I think for the demo, that's probably best.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to create a post service. Sorry, not service, a post library inside API.
Inside API, so
yeah.
A post. So it's going to be a nest library again?
Yep, nest library. And what we want to do here is give it the name post. I always prefer singular in the directory API. And then do your trick with the import path.
Yep, I'll do that. So it's going to be PANG stream API post. Do we give it a service?
Yes, let's add a service because this is where we want to do our data access. And we don't need a test runner. And this is one we can do. And if you like, while we're at it, you might already create the user one as well, because I think that's what we're going to need anyway.
For some reason, like the nest schematics runs a little bit slower.
I know why. I know why it is, but I didn't file a bug for it yet. It's a trivial bug, but it's not trivial to fix.
I see. What happened?
It tries to delete two files. After generating, it extends Node.js lib. And after it deletes two files that are created. And in order to do this, it walks the whole file tree, including your node modules. So the bigger your project and the bigger your node modules, the more time this thing will take. Yeah, I sometimes work around it, go into node modules, delete these two lines, and then do it manually.
I see.
So cool. We have our post service and our user service, and this is probably the most important. So what I generally start out with, go to the API post service, and here in the constructor, inject our API data access service. So we can do private read-only API. I just call it data, just to make it very short, and I always have them called data. API data access service. Now, Sgs Dependency Injection works this way. If you inject this one, you need to go to the module and import, inside imports, add the module that exposes this one.
Yep.
So that's data access module.
Yep. Before we forgot, let's just remove this from here.
Yeah, and now here we can say import our API post module inside app and API user module. Very cool. Now also note, we don't create one for comments. I always think, okay, comments are a part of post and we will never ask for a comment directly without its post. But if you want to add more and if you want to have a separate setup for post, then that's totally fine.
Okay, that's fine.
Now in app post module, what we want to do here is, or in the service actually, in app post API post service, what I like to do here is define a method that gives back all of our posts. So we're going to call it posts. This is just going to be a method. And what we're going to do is return this.data dot posts, post singular, dot find all. Find many, sorry, find many. Now, what we could do here is add more filters, but for now, we're basically only interested in the all the posts. So let's get this one here. And in order to use this, yeah, you can type this. I generally don't really type them. You could do a post, and so the point here is that post, you can import it from @Prisma client. It will import from @Prisma client. There you go. Now, if you want to hide Prisma client, it's supposed to array. Yes, correct. If you want to hide Prisma client, you can say, okay, export everything from Prisma client inside the API data access lib, so it all imports from the same one.
Interesting, yeah.
But in a little bit, we see that this might bite us. So, but let's leave it here because we might look at why it bites us.
Yep. Let's do that. I want to know
cool.
why.
Yep. Yes. So, API post service. So we're basically working backwards, right? We first created the database. Now we create the service, and now in GraphQL terms, we need to create the resolver. So next to this API post service.ts, we're going to create a new file. It's called api-post.resolver.ts. And this is our GraphQL endpoint.
Do we need to install the Nest GraphQL?
We do, yes. So npm install @nest.js/GraphQL. And you also want to add the GraphQL dependency itself.
Yeah.
So it's
GraphQL.
Yeah. And we might need another one, but let's see.
Mm-hmm.
With
Apollo, right?
Apollo is for the Apollo is what it's powered Nest.js GraphQL. Apollo Express is what we use. Yes, it's Apollo server. And we actually need to configure it as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna give the documentation to the chat. So if you go to doc.nestjs.com, there's a GraphQL section that's gonna walk you through how to set up GraphQL with Nest.js.
Yep. And actually, it tells us that we even need more packages. So we need GraphQL tools and Apollo Server Express. So
let's do that as well. So npm int and GraphQL tools.
Yeah, perfect. Now, one thing we want to do, and this really depends on where you want to have it. I think for now we can use the app module in the API is where we configure GraphQL. So we can say at some point we need to say, hey Nest, you are now working with GraphQL, and we need to import the GraphQL module from @nest.js GraphQL. And depending on your app, you might have a better place to do this. Here we take the for root method on it, and we pass in the options. Now, what I want to do is set auto schema file to true. And what this will do, because in Nest.js GraphQL here, we take, again, a code-first approach. So we don't write our own GraphQL schema, but we write classes with decorators, and that will generate our schema file for us.
Yeah, nice.
So no need for that. Yeah, and with this, it should all be good. So let's quickly save this and make sure that it runs in the terminal so that we don't have any weird things. This will most likely not work, so that's good. So we just created there's a bunch of errors here. We just created the two modules here, API post and API user. It won't recognize it because it didn't restart the server, and we updated tsconfig. So that's one. So we should be able to restart it again, yes. And now it will start complaining to us because we told it it's a GraphQL server, but we never gave it a schema. So the GraphQL server here says, hey, I need at least one query object. And this is a common error. If you run into this, might be frustrating. It's fairly simple. We just need to provide a query. So let's start building one. So GraphQL per specification needs at least one query to be able to start the server. Otherwise, it cannot start the server.
Mm-hmm.
So in our API post resolver right now, what we can do here, export class API post resolver, and this is decorated by the resolver property. And resolver is what we get imported from Nest.js GraphQL.
Oh.
And this is also, behind the scenes, this is also an injectable. So in order for this to work, we need to provide it inside the modules array. So we can do the constructor here. We can say private read-only service, is what I use. And then call it API post service here. Okay. And now this should be able to import from just next to itself. So let's change this to prevent. Yeah, there you go. And what we want to do here is add a query. And the query is going to be called posts. So we can first create the method posts, which is a method, and we return whatever says this.service.posts. So this is very simple. We don't take any parameters. In order for us to say to GraphQL that this is a query, we need to decorate it. So add query. And this one, make sure you get it from Nest.js GraphQL and not Nest.js common. Now, inside this decorator query, we need to provide a function here. And this function, it's a fat arrow function, returns an array of capital post. And this is the syntax. There you go. Let's look at post in a second, because we're going to build this one in a second. At this moment, we cannot import it from Prisma because it doesn't know the GraphQL information. But we get to that in a second. But let's add it here as first. Add the post. No, in line 8, inside the array. Let's finish this up. So here it's post with a capital P. We'll create this file in a second. And then the last parameter in the query decorator, here you go. We want to add an object and set nullable to true. So in GraphQL, it's best practice to make every file nullable. It might sound counterintuitive, and there might be ways around this, but I find that 99% of my fields and methods, etc., are all nullable in GraphQL. This makes for way easier error handling. Now, the post one here, this is an interesting one. Ideally, we would be able to call in post from Prisma directly and pass it in here, but that's not the reality. The Prisma posts are not decorated with any info from Nest.js, so Nest.js doesn't know what kind of type it is. So we need to create our own model here. So inside the lib folder here, I create a new folder models and create post.model.ts. And in post.model.ts, we're going to export class model post. Yeah, there you go. Very good. Export class post and decorate it with the add object type decorator. Now, as you probably know, that Chow has a library called Automapper that maps from one object to another object in Nest.js. This might be a use case for something like an Automapper, because what we're basically trying to do here is create a model that's very similar to the stuff that's generated in the Prisma client, and we're going to decorate it with some fields. So we're basically going to say, hey, we have an object called post, and these are the fields we want to expose. And the upside is that you don't expose fields that you want to hide. But the downside is you basically now we need to duplicate it. It's only one time, but we need to duplicate our fields.
All right. So
quickest way is go into your node modules, into this .prisma client folder. So take all the fields here. Yep. And paste them in. Now, okay. What we want to say here is we want to add the add field decorator to all of these. Add field, which is a method. And we're going to say nullable true for all of these.
For all of these?
Yeah, so inside here, we're going to say nullable true. And I wish Nest had an option to mark nullable as default, but I don't think there is. And one of the things that we don't need is the author ID. Instead, what we can say here is we can say, hey, this author ID, actually what we want to have to see here is an author and not its ID. So what we can say is author. Author has the type user. So let's add it. And in order for this to work right, the first property of field, we need to set it to a method. So the first property before the options, yeah, the function here, and we say we return user here. So cool. Now we say, okay, this field returns a user. Let's create the user. So inside our user library, lib, create a models, user.model.ts. Now this is going to be very much the same. Export class user, decorate it with the add object type, and pick up all these things.
And
add object type. And
so
then,
this is something on the TypeScript side or on the GraphQL side we can have a base class for this one.
Totally. For this one, we totally can have a base class, and I definitely recommend you doing this. Let's get rid of role for now, because this is something we need to fix. We do want to decorate these ones with the field, at least a few of them. We don't need to do all of them, but we can might as well add fields, import them, and make nullable true for all of these. Now, awesome. So this is one of the main pain points in this stack. For now, we have to duplicate it, and I think with some magic and some scripts, we can definitely abstract this one step further and basically just hide the fields. And there's actually code from in the Nest.js project that generates these things for you. It's a Webpack plugin, but I never looked into it. Now, last thing here in the user model for now is open index.ts and export our user module in the public API. And this way we can import it from inside our post module. Now, this is also something we can also set the other side of the relationship. So we could say, hey, user, you have an array of posts, but this will lead into a circular dependency. So we're not going to bother with that at this moment. And now inside our model, we can import this user. And now can go back to our post resolver, import this post type. Now it's already highlighting. And we want to make sure that it's a relative import. So we don't want to do the line 2, the add PANG stream.
Oh, yep.
Just a local model. And then last thing we need to do is register our API post resolver in the providers array of the module. So we go API post module, and in providers, we import this one. Now, very cool. If we now start again, if we hit save and go back to the terminal, we should see that it started up. There you go. Awesome. Now, the API is listening at port 333/API. So let's click into this one and change the /API with /playground, /GraphQL. Yep. And this will load in the GraphQL. Yep. And this will load in the GraphQL playground. And if you open the docs tab on the side, then you see that we have one query post, and it has an array of posts. So let's hit the query. Let's execute it and see what it works. So in here, we type query, and we can say posts, and then we say, let's get ID and text, maybe for now. And let's execute it. You can hit Command Enter, and there you go. First post is there. So this is the post we just added in Prisma Studio. Now, author and ID. Okay, let's get into this right away. Now, this is something GraphQL offers, and it's now null. And why is this null? Because we never tell Prisma that it needs to include this relationship. So we can quickly go back to our API post service and say, if we want to get a list, if we want to say find many of posts, we also want to include the author. Now, I advise you can just use IntelliSense to include the author. And you can set it to true, or you can specify it. But for now, you can go into depth, so you can get more relationships of the author just by typing it all out. But for now, we say author true, include author true. So I think this is a very, very nice and descriptive way to make your relationships.
Correct. But then I noticed something that it had a select. So for folks that do not use GraphQL, you can actually limit the fields from the author that you want to fetch here.
Yeah, and this is something, in this case, it might be something you really want. So you only say, for each post, I only want its username, name, and avatar URL and ID.
Correct. It's literally the same as the REST API that I built with the DTL in mind. Like for post, I have everything, right? But then for post DTL that return back to the client on the post DTL, instead of the user, I have just user information, and it only has minimal data about that user. Yeah.
For instance, email address is something you often don't want to show on public pages. And password is something you don't even want to think about showing. So this makes a lot of sense. Also, this is definitely something that you, in real life apps, you generally abstract out the include. So what I often end up with in my API post service, I just have a central include. And then in all the methods where I call into Prisma, I say include is this.include. And it will be the same for the whole service.
And and actually you can have this, like the whole select as a parameter to the function. So from the consumer side, you can pass in and call it whatever you want.
Yeah. For now, though, let's get author true. And if we move back to the playground and you hit Command Enter again, then you should see, okay, now it adds the relationship.
Awesome.
So,
that's nice.
yeah. So we build an API, and I think we have a very minimal code approach here, because we didn't really write any real code besides our model and our resolvers and our function. The rest was all boilerplate to get us started.
Yep.
Now, okay, what do we want to do next? What we can do is look at modeling the comments relation, but it's basically going to be the same. Or we can look at creating a post, or we can look at connecting it up to Angular. So the connecting up to Angular might be the...
Yeah, let's do connect to the Angular, because I want to show the generation side of things on the client.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So we're going to switch gears here. We have now a GraphQL endpoint, and at this moment, it only has one query, and it only returns an array of posts with their author. Let's make sure we can render this out in Angular. So in order for us to do this, we need to install the Apollo client for Angular. So we can say ng-add Apollo-Angular. And this will install the Apollo client for Angular, and it will change some things in our app. I think the default configuration should be good to go. This is a super well-maintained project, and it's by the same people that make a lot of other software in Angular world, the Guild. And yeah, this is a pretty cool thing. Okay, it will ask what is our GraphQL endpoint. So we can say http // and localhost 3333/GraphQL. So we basically instructed where our GraphQL client is. Perfect. Can I read tsconfig.json? Okay, so this has to do with the change of tsconfig and tsconfig base. And I think the quickest here is symlink tsconfig base to tsconf quickly. So ln.ash, ln- no, I wouldn't rename it, because this is asking for issues down the line with NX.
Oh.
So I would just create a symlink quickly, just so ng-add is happy. So in the terminal, if you run ln-s, so soft link or symlink space tsconfig.base.json and call it tsconfig.json. So we basically make a link, a symbolic link. File system will now say, oh, I have file called tsconfig.json, but it's actually your tsconfig. And there you go. Now it updates. And I think what it did, if you open tsconfig base, you can see that it actually added a esnext.async iterable up there. So in the lib, it added this one. Yeah. Now we have Apollo installed. So if we go to our apps demo and the app module of the Angular app, we see that we there have the Apollo client installed. It's added here a GraphQL module, and the GraphQL module is here. This is where your Apollo client gets configured. So for instance, if you now want to add a custom cache solution for Apollo, you can do this here. If you want to add support for WebSockets, this is the file you go to and you configure your whole GraphQL setup. But yeah, for now it just works. So it loads in Apollo and we can just consume it. Now, what most people do is they follow documentation, which they should, and they end up using Apollo client right away. But I'm super lazy and I don't like using Apollo client right away. So I use a thing called GraphQL code generation, and we need to install another package. So let's npm install -d add GraphQL-codegen. It's GraphQL-codegen, which is the org, and then the packages /CLI. So GraphQL-codegen, at GraphQL.codegen, which is the scope.
That's codegen
/CLI.
CLI. Okay.
Yep, and you can install this one. And then once this is installed, we can run GraphQL codegen as a command with npx.
I see.
Yeah, GraphQL CodeGen CLI. So what GraphQL CodeGen does, it has two moving parts. One is we give it a lot of queries that we want to execute. And second is it creates a config file. So let's run GraphQL CodeGen init to initialize this project. And it will ask us a few questions. It will already detect that we're in an application built with Angular. So we say, okay, application built with Angular. We're going to hit enter. And the schema, what is the address of the schema? So here we can again say localhost 3333 /GraphQL, and it will look up the schema here. Where are our fragments? Now, we didn't really think about this yet. I often end up using this in a library, so we can re-import it. I'm not sure if you have a lib inside the demo app where we can store this. So we have demo.
I have a shared one.
Yeah, so what you can do, for instance, create a lib called SDK here in demo or in shared, but I think here in demo, and this is an Angular lib.
It's called SDK.
Yeah, we can leave this as is. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Directory is called demo. And I think your import path might be a thing we need to do. And I think we don't need any of the other stuff. We just need to have a module, a library that we can use and import from. Very cool. So this one's way quicker. Now lib SDK and inside source. What I generally do is I ignore the lib folder, but I instead, next to the lib folder in source, I create a GraphQL folder. So let's move to the, here, create a folder called GraphQL. And inside here, we can create a file already right now, and it's called maybe feature-post.graphql. And it's in feature-post.graphql. And here we do every query. Let's create a text, and let's make sure that the plugin gets installed here by WebStorm. And so this is where we place our queries that we're actually going to use. So in order to answer the question that code generator, GraphQL CodeGen init asked you, you want to right click on the GraphQL folder and copy path. So yeah, copy path. And this is the one from context root. Then paste it in and add /*/ /star.graphql. Yeah. So now it will find all the GraphQL files in this libs demo SDK source GraphQL folder, and it will use that to generate our custom SDK. The next question is which plugins you want to do. We're just going to leave this by default.
Okay.
And where do we want to write the output? So what I generally do is in this demo SDK source, I create another folder next to GraphQL and lib, call it generated. So this is where generated folders live. And we can paste in that one right here, write the output to generated /graphql.ts. So here we just pass in a file, like which file it will write. Here you go, enter. And this should give us, we also want to create an introspection file. You can just hit enter here, yes. And say the name of my file is codegen.yaml. And in which package should we run? I call this SDK. Now, a bunch of questions, but in fact, what it did is it created codegen.yaml for us. We gave it a few questions, and we need to now install the dependencies. So let's run npm install, and then in the meanwhile, open codegen.yaml to see what it created for us.
Yep, let's do that. So codegen, what?
It should be in the root. Yeah, there you go. Now, this is basically all the questions that we gave it, all the answers to the question that we gave it. It will override any existing code. It tells us where the schema lives, which documents we use as a source, and then it has an array of things or an object of things, a dictionary. This file gets created with these plugins. So the file on line 5, libs demo SDK source generate GraphQL.ts gets generated by these plugins. And actually, we want to give a configuration here. So you can above the plugins key, you can add a new key. Say config, yep, semicolon, and hit a new line, and just say SDK class. We don't need to specify an array here. It's just an object SDK class with capital C. No, only the S is small, and then SDK class. SDK class is the word. Now it's one term, SDK class, and the value is true. Yes, 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 perfect. Now this will create a small helper class that's super useful, and we'll see that in a little bit. But in any case, we run the GraphQL CodeGen init, and it added a bunch of files, dependencies to package.json, and this is why we needed to run npm install. And now you can do npm run SDK. And this will run the GraphQL CodeGen script with CodeGen, and something went wrong. Okay. Cannot find any GraphQL definition. So libs web. Okay, yeah, this is good because our GraphQL schema is actually empty. So we have a feature post GraphQL, but we don't define any queries here. So what you can do here is query, say query, give it a name, let's say posts with a capital P. Yep, very good. And here, if you hit enter, we can say posts with a small, and we can pass in whatever the shape of our post is. Now you see that you don't get any auto completion here, which is a bit strange. You can hit the little wrench icon there in the top of this field. Yep. And it will say, and the bottom, create a GraphQL config. So we're going to do that. And hit OK, because this is the, oh no, we want to probably do it in the root of the project. I'm not sure. But here we can say on line 7, we can change it to port 333. Slash GraphQL, and this should and set introspect to true.
Oh.
Yep, introspect to true, and this should give us a proper way to handle database. And you can quickly test by just hit the play button here to see if this will work. There you go. Yep. It will at least work. There might be some other configuration to get this work better, but what I just generally do is go back to the playground and copy the query that I created in the playground. So we can take whatever we have here, add it to post. Okay, perfect. So this is now our first query, and let's move back, and this works as expected, and we can move back to our terminal and run again this npm run SDK, and there you go. It generated stuff for us. So it now also see that something got generated, so we have this folder here has content, and if we look into graphql.ts, we can open this file. This is all the code you don't need to write, that you normally write to access your GraphQL code. So this is the API that we use in our Angular apps, and we directly connect it to our Nest.js endpoint, which means that if we add a new file type to our post in the backend, it will get generated automatically and be available in the front end. Yep. Like adding new fields is not the most interesting, but if you delete a field, it's very nice that your front end now says, hey, I'm calling into this field here, and you no longer provide it. So this is a fully type-safe stack in this essence. One of the things we want to quickly look at is search for Apollo Angular SDK. In this file, yeah, Apollo Angular SDK. There you go. This is a service that's generated for us, and this basically exposes all of our queries on a service. So we can now say at any place where we want to use it, we can basically inject this one and start using it.
Yep.
So let's move to the post here. Yep. And inside
this one right here, inside
the post module. Oh, you don't even have this.
Yeah, I just have component right here. So can I inject in the component real quick here?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do the dirty stuff right away.
Yep.
Apollo Angular SDK. Now, and what you want to do, what you can do here inside the constructor, or right where you are right now, post $. Now, this is not an observable post. Let's not type it right away, or let's. Now, what I do here on line 22, you can definitely say this.sdk.posts which is a method, but it will expose a more complicated structure than just the data. So it will have error handling on it. And so, okay, let's just print this inside the template. So you can just have like the pre-tag, pipe it to async with JSON. So we have just a very raw view of whatever we want to do, whatever we're downloading here, the data.
Yep.
And yep, we can clean this up a little bit. So now we need to go visit this page.
Yep, let me go to my shell. And nice, all right.
You can go to the post endpoint.
There we go. I can go to localhost 4200. There we go.
Okay, it's already there. Okay, cool. So we see that this basically gives us back a object with multiple properties. So it has a property data, it has loading status and network status. So if you, for instance, you work offline and you properly configure Apollo cache, network status will indicate that, hey, it gets the data from cache and not from the live network API. We have the loading indicator here as well, and this will also pass in any errors. So if we have a failure here, maybe if you stop your server in the backend and you refresh here, that error will get posted. I'm not really sure if this is the type of things that errors out, but we can at least try. So we refresh here. Okay, well now we'll say no because it has connection error. But if you make a invalid query, for instance, then that will appear here inside the result object. So what we're actually interested are most of the times is not the result set directly, but the result set.data.
Yep.
Now, also one thing to bear in mind, that data by itself, so what you can do for right now inside our component is add a pipe onto the posts method that we use right in the back here, add a pipe, and inside that map result to result.data. Now this, as you can see, this is all strongly typed. So you can also say data.posts if you want, if that's what you like. You can say posts, and now your observable will match the shape of a post array. And this is basically what you're looking at most of the time. But yeah,
can we get rid of this type name?
We can, I mean, we might, but it's not something we generally, I never got rid of it. Apollo adds it automatically, and Apollo uses this for the cache. So Apollo needs to know this property, so it knows which object it is and it caches it.
This is what I usually do. So in the application that I don't use Apollo, I don't use GraphQL. I usually have the two API response operator to convert this observable of data to an observable of API response that gives me the loading status back. So what I usually do is just I still get the result. Actually, I'm going to get the result loading would be result dot loading, and data would be result dot data dot post. And now my post, instead of like post, I'm going to have post response, and I'm going to get a delay of 1000. And here I can do ng container ngf response async as response response, and then I will do span loading ngf response dot loading. Now done.
Yep, create a template for it,
and I will have my response dot post
dot data
data here with the JSON. Save.
Now we don't see loading because you put a delay in the delay inside here, but we can go in the backend and add basically delay there if we like.
So let's go to the backend, which is
API the resolver or the service. So what you can do is capture this, basically capture the result here in using await. So you can say const post equals this await that, yep. And now what you want to do is return, I mean, there's several ways to go about it. I think promise.resolve is, or you can use a RxJS. Yeah, that's probably the fastest. Yeah, you can just
do that. So I'm going to do
from, yes, from, going to convert it straight away, and then pipe and add a delay here. Yeah, that's way easier. Everything should be RxJS.
Sweet. I'm just going to read it. There we go.
Okay,
Not,
I don't see the loading yet.
Let me grab the whole response.
But I think this is also logical, because we wait till we get back to response, and it will not update this loading before it gets the initial response. This is often used for reloads and stuff like this.
So what I usually do for my API response operator is to have like a start with. Actually, I have it right here.
Yeah.
So there's two API response right here. I'm just gonna start with the loading.
Yeah, yeah. And what I see myself doing, and let's not dive into the component store rabbit hole, but if you have like something like component store, we handle this outside. And now I find myself using GraphQL with Angular basically as a simple data transport mechanism. I don't really use any of the Apollo client stuff as caching. I generally actually disable caching because it might get in the way. And I also don't use the loading properties. For me, it's just a dump data a dump data export, but it's actually pretty smart. It's not really dump. It's quite intelligent. And yeah, I use it for the strong type, and this is what I most like. So yeah, maybe we can recap and go over all the steps in the whole chain for a second. Yep. And then what I'd like to show is, I mean, maybe that's the thing we should do, is add another model right now and see what steps do we need. So we started out with the Prisma schema. So we can open up schema.prisma, and inside here, we defined our user and our post model, and we added a relationship between user and post, where we say a user has many posts. Now, if we want to do a comment, we can basically say model comment, copy over the first 3 fields, copy over the first 4 fields, because text is also one. Now, author is also one, because a comment also has an author. So we can say, take this relationship and make sure that we change the relationship name here to has many comment. Now this is one. And also we want to add a new relationship where we say a comment belongs to a post. So we say post, and then capital P post at relationship post has many comments. And we're again going to say the local fields here on the array. So we say fields equals post ID, and it references the ID on the remote model on the other side, which is ID. Now we need to add a post ID field inside comment. We say post ID, it's an integer, and now we run npx Prisma format to validate it, and so that it makes our own, the second part of the relationship. So this should change 2 things. On the post model, we should now have a comment, which is a comment array. Let's change this to comments, so it's more fluid. Here, comments with a lowercase c, yep, and the same there, comments with a lowercase c. So this is just convention. I hope they will do this automatically at some point. But here we go. We created a new model post, and we created this. If we want to have data, we might pop open Prisma Studio and add a comment to our post so that we can quickly iterate on this. And then maybe after we've shown it, because I think the goal is to show this comment inside this UI. And once we've shown it, we can quickly take a look at how to do an input, because I think that's another thing.
So I think you need to Studio.
Yeah, you need to start Studio again because it has a new schema. And in the back, it will generate a custom Prisma client for this. Oh, okay. Yes. So the issue here is we created schema, we formatted it, but we didn't apply the change to the database. So we need to say Prisma DB push, npx Prisma DB push.
Oops. So we're gonna do npx Prisma DB push.
DB push, preview feature. And now it says your database. And let's do arrow up, run the command again, because we see your database is now in sync. But if we run it again and you hit enter, it will say DB is already in sync. So it has intelligence. It knows what to do. It will also tell you, like, if we would get rid of our user ID username field, it will not allow it because it was required. And you can quickly break it if you like. If you comment out user ID for a second and you run Prisma DB push again, it will not do it by default because this is a break and change. So it has data protection in here. It will drop the column and it says, okay, this is destructive operation. You will lose data. I want you to force this or to figure it out first. So let's add this back. So now with this, we can load again the Prisma Studio. And once that pops up, we should be able to go to the comment is already there. So we can say add record here. It's auto incremented. So we can pick the user making the comment. We can pick the post it's commenting on. And we can add a little text here, which is the actual comment. Yep. And we can save the change. And now this is saved in the database. So Prisma is saved and we have new data, and that's with like 10 lines of code and few comments. And what we now want to do is make in our Nest.js, so that's the second step, in Nest.js, add a model. So let's go to our post library because model is very close to post. So libs API post source models and add the comment model, which is basically a comment of this one. So yeah, this is a comment array, comments array, and this is a field type, and it returns a method and has an array of comments in this syntax, and it's nullable true. Now, in order to make this comment, we need to create a comment model. So we can, I think we just sit it next to the comment lib. So comment model.ts, and you can basically copy paste a lot of the fields you have from comments, because a comment and a model, they look very much the same. I would even copy it from this file. So all the way down to even author, all the way down to author. And we need to make sure that we decorate the class with the object type decorator, because that's the way we tell Nest.js, like, hey, this is an object type. Okay, cool. So, okay, now the back relation that you want to make, you probably don't want to make this for two reasons. One, it's a circular dependency. There's a way around this, but for now, this is not what we want. But also, if you think about it, it's very improbable that we ever will get a singular comment and look for the post that belongs to the comment. Correct. This is not a very common use case. So it's often not needed. Cool. So now we have this one, we have post. And if we go back to our playground, we see that it already appears. So we refresh the playground here. And if we go into the docs, we should see that if we click post, we have now comments array. Cool. So we can query it. So let's do comments array. And say, okay, comments. And what do we want to know from a comment? I think the ID and the text and the author. And the author takes properties, so we want to know the ID and the email, just the same as what we did for the other one. Now, if you hit comment enter, we'll see this again is null, but you now know how to fix this.
We're going to go to the post service, and we're going to do the comments.
Yeah, so it might be that this not update. This is totally normal. This is just your TypeScript stuff. It generates in Prisma client. So what I often do, comment click into the Prisma client I have there on the import. Now go back and it will have included this. It should have included this. I open this file, and basically search for comments, because it should be the plural term comments should be there somewhere. Comments, yes, it knows that it has comments on the user, and it knows it has comments on the post include. So this is basically to fresh up your TypeScript, because if you now go back to your post service, API post service, it will find it.
Actually, let's do quick
or restart post service. So this is cool, but actually we don't want to have to just a comment. Yeah, there you go. We don't want to just have the comment. We also, let's execute this first. So see what happens here.
Yep.
So now if we say comments, it will load the comments. So post, and we have the first comment, but now we don't have the author. So this is a second include, one level deep. Include takes an object. And here we say include the author. It's true. Now I think this is probably one of the shortest database queries you ever written with this much functionality.
Yep. You have like 2 or 3 joins here.
Yeah. And this behind the scenes, if you know GraphQL, if you know SQL, you know, I can already see it uses a where, and it uses like join this on that.
Yep.
But here, super expressive. So we fixed the Prisma part. We added the comment. We added the comment in Nest.js, so our GraphQL public API knows about it. Now let's add it to the SDK. So copy this query.
Yep. So
copy the whole query here and open our future post GraphQL file. And basically replace the query with the updated query. There you go. And this should be enough. So we can now start run npm run SDK in order for this to generate. And if we now scroll back to our website and we look at the output.
Oops, this one.
You see that it's already there.
There we go.
So we didn't need to do anything on the GraphQL side. I see this as a 3-step process. 1, Prisma, add it. 2, Nest.js, expose it. 3, SDK, define that you want to have it.
So I'm going to do a text. So first thing is modify the Prisma schema.
Yep.
And then we run, I guess,
npx Prisma format and npx Prisma
format. And then we run npx Prisma
db push. Preview feature.
Might not need later.
Yep.
In the future.
And I often create a custom script for this. So what I have is an npm script called Prisma ;apply, where I run just these 2 commands.
These 2 commands can go in a npm script. And then after that, we're going to update our query, right? Based on, we'll create a model.
Create a model for this, so you have a representation in our public API.
Nest.js GraphQL model.
Yeah.
Prisma schema.
Yep. And then update the query.
Update query needed. This is what the data access service.
Yep. And use the include here and use type safety to autocomplete your things.
Use include to join tables as needed.
Yeah. And then afterwards, you can update your SDK and run that again.
Yep, update the GraphQL query.
Yeah, update the GraphQL query and
the client side, and then run rerun the npm run SDK.
Yep.
Generate Apollo SDK stuff.
Yep, totally.
Yep, nice.
So this is basically your workflow, and this creates complete type safety, because if we for instance, right now we just print the whole object, so we never say, okay, give me the username from this user. But if you would do this, Angular uses type safety, code generated by Apollo, and if we then get rid of this field in Nest.js and run the SDK again, our Angular frontend will complain because you now got rid of a field that it depends on, and type safety will kick in. And this is what makes the stack so powerful for me. You can follow basically type errors to build your front end. You can go the other way around. Right now we did database first, Nest.js, GraphQL, and Angular, but you can do the other way around. You can say, okay, give me this property on the post. It doesn't exist. Okay, I want to add it to the query. That will fail because it doesn't work in Nest.js. Go to Nest.js, you add it. That will not resolve to a field because it exists, and you go in Prisma and you create it.
Yep.
But it's very much error message driven.
Right. I think that's the main benefit of any like full stack TypeScript, is that you get the compilation time feedback right away.
Yeah, totally. It's a big time saver. And for me, having Prisma, it's, I think, the most expressive way to generate a database layer. It's super low on the code. You just you design your desired situation and you run with it. One of the frequently asked questions on Prisma is what databases does it support? And right now, it only supports 3 databases, Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite. And in the future, they will add more data layers. And if you want to see MongoDB, for instance, make sure to go to the Prisma client, the Prisma repo on GitHub, and start the issue where they ask for MongoDB support, because they are very much influenced their development driven on that stuff.
So for GraphQL stuff, I remember I have something to actually generate the schema that you don't have to write your schema. So
this one, that's
GraphQL here.
If you go into an app module of the API, and where we have auto schema file, we have set it true right now. If we pass in a file name, it will generate it for you.
I see.
This is probably what you have here is in your GQL module. Auto schema file is set to a path here, schema GraphQL. This is very good, and this is how I prefer to use it. It creates a file, and then I tell my GraphQL code gen that the schema property is not a URL, but it's this file.
Yep. Let me look at my code gen. I think I have my code gen in here as well. But let's see. There should be a code gen somewhere. Let me look. Code gen.yaml. Nope. All right. I don't know. I don't know where it is. But
maybe you can search for Apollo inside the repo, so we can see how you do the queries, because that's something a lot of people don't know about.
I have it, but let's see on my. Wait, what? This branch doesn't have any. Let me just give me 1 second here. This branch doesn't have any.
Is it this fork?
It's a fork. Of this fork. But
yeah. Okay.
There we go. So lips. Huh, interesting. I'm gonna take a look later, but it should be in here. Actually, let's look back into this one. This should have it.
GQL.
Apps. Source. There we go. So module.
So here you load the GraphQL module.
GraphQL module.
It's a local.
In core GraphQL. There we go. Service and query. Yep. So this is the generated.
Yeah, but you most likely didn't generate the SDK class, I think, because it's not on by default.
Right. Yep.
And this means that you need to run the queries manually. So what I found myself doing was, after generating my GraphQL stuff, I found myself creating a big service that had all of these methods and exposed it. And I was doing it over and over again. And then I realized I might as well just make a PR for GraphQL CodeGen Angular and add it. So it got accepted about a year ago. And this is a huge time saver.
Nice.
So here, do you have GraphQL CodeGen in the dev dependencies?
I think so. I would think so.
Ruslan, hey Ruslan, good to see you here. Ruslan says use the T to find files in GitHub repo. Yeah, that's correct. I think you can just use T and run YAML, search for YAML, and that should give your GraphQL CodeGen. It's not there.
I don't have it. Yeah,
it's not there.
It's not there.
No.
Is this one? Yeah, it's this one. It's
this one. Okay, graph.graphql config.yaml. It's a confusing name. But yeah. Okay, it's this file, and you pointed line 2. You pointed to the schema, which is how I use it as well.
Yep.
But I think for the initial idea, pointing it both to the API, both the client and your code gen, is a bit easier to map mentally.
Yep. Interesting.
Yeah. So definitely check out the SDK class inside here. If you use GraphQL with Angular and you generate code, do make sure to check your SDK class and use that one for a very, very simple, easy one import to remember. And from here on, I think it's very much continuing. I think we have 5 minutes left. We could give a go at creating an input to make sure that we know how to create a mutation, because now we only looked at query.
Yep.
So quickly, let's add an input here, and let's add a query for a new post. And let's not worry too much. Let's hard code your username because we don't have any authentication. So inside our API post service. So this is a great point to start. So we're going to say async create post, and this is going to take an input, a variable called input, and this is of type create post input. And this is not something we created yet, but we will create in a little bit. Now what we do here is return this.data.post.create, and create takes an object with a key of data, and data will be our input. So you can basically add all the fields here. Now, if we think about it for a second, our post input, we actually only need a text because we're going to hard code the user for now. So we're going to say text is input.text, and then author. Now, author, what we want to do here is define a relationship. So you can do two things. You can either create an author or connect an author. In our case, we're going to connect the author.
So
or you do
connect.
Connect and create. Yeah, but we do connect. And connect. Now let's do connect because connect and create is not really. So normally our database, our API will tell us, oh, this request got made by narc. Somehow we add authentication, and then we know, okay, this thing is built by narc. But let's hard code your username in here. So this takes an object, and this object knows now the uniquely identifiable fields from the user. So we can say username. And let's hard code it for narc. And this will make this command happy. So now we need to create our input. So what I do is next to the models folder, I create a folder called DTOs or DTO, and create.post input.ts exactly. Yep, just like that. And this will export a new class, create post input. And this takes text as a string, and we need to decorate it with the field. So the decorate property with that field, we don't make it nullable at this time because we do want to require it here. So this is good as it is. And here, the class, we need to decorate it with the input type decorator.
Okay.
Input type. So this is two things, object type and input type. This is basically the two types of fields you have. Now we can go back to our service, import this one. Import it from here. Very good. And now we can go back to our resolver and say, hey, we have an add mutation or create post here. Yep. And this is an add mutation. And this returns a function with an individual post. And make sure that nullable is true. So if we don't have any errors, that it will not be the null error. Now in this create post method, we return this.service.create post, and we pass in input. We don't have input, so let's define it inside our create post method. We do the add args decorator. So this is from Nest.js GraphQL.
Yep.
It got imported there. Yeah, perfect. Make sure you import it from there and don't import it from Nest.js common. And here we say create post input, and we also inside args, we need to pass in a string with the name of the input. So we say properties called input. This is what is get exposed. And if we now hop back to our playground, we should be able to see we have a second query, which is a mutation, second operation, I should say. So we refresh this here, open the docs panel. We say we have a mutation called create post, and it knows what the input is, and it knows what to return. So let's, on line 2, let's give the query a name. Let's give this query the name posts. And let's add a mutation down below, a mutation with the name create post. Create post, and this is a mutation called create post. And this create post takes an input. So what you can do here is make this thing variable. So we can either say input and just have a text hello world or something. So this takes an object.
I don't know how to the syntax. I don't know the syntax of
Yeah,
this.
so take an object, text,
Text,
and do the string with double quotes, and just your string, hello world,
hello world,
and make it return. Just let's take the ID. That's fine.
Okay.
Now hit Command Enter again, so you execute this query, and you can hit it a few times, 2, 3. Yep. Okay, it creates posts, and if you now go back to your other query on top,
Okay. Yeah.
you can create this one. And you see that all the posts are created by Chow, and they don't have any comments. And this is the way to do an input in GraphQL. Send the data
Nice.
up to the post.
Nice.
Now in the real app, lastly, we're over time, but I'm not sure if we can add this query to the GraphQL code generator, and then we can take a look at the Angular part for this last.
Yep. Let's do that.
So in our feature post of GraphQL, we're going to add second query. And what we're going to do here is query a mutation. That's right, a mutation, give it a name, create post. And very good, copy this one over. Now, we probably don't want to hard code this text. So we can do two things. We can either pass in text into create post, but I prefer to pass in the whole input. So let's say $input. Then on line 20, we're going to create post. We're going to have it take a parameter. Create post on line 20, one line up. And say, here, take a function, add parentheses. And say $input, semicolon. And this should be create post input. And it's exclamation mark because we need to say that it's required. Very good. So this will just create a post in the database and return our back the ID of the post.
Okay.
This is what you generally want. You want to click a new post, get back the ID so you can navigate to that new item.
Yep.
Now run SDK again. Very good. And this gets generated. Okay. And now if we go back to our post component where we injected the SDK, we can basically say here, let's just in the constructor do it. This.sdk.create post. It got added there magically, and it takes an object with one input with a text, and you say hello noise, perfect, and you need to subscribe to this because it's an observable. And then each time we refresh, and we can console log the output totally. And then each time we refresh, we should have a new post on the page. So let's see, we here with the last one is post ID 6. And then if we hit refresh, null, and they will all load in, and then with post ID 7, let's get added here.
Nice.
So this is basically the PANG stack in a nutshell, and this is the fastest I've went over it, doing it all live. So yeah, there's definitely more content on this. I got a show on Angular Air where I go over it from a bit different angle. I touch on all of these. And I got some more live streams on my channel called beeman dev on YouTube that you can check out. And I got a ton of content around NX, Prisma, Angular, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also online on my stream often with Chow. He's a resident of my stream. We've been online 4 times. Beeman dev is what you can search for.
Yep. So
yeah, this is... I see I already gained a few followers, so that's awesome. I think that's from the Vietnamese crowd. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Definitely follow beeman there. Like we do quality stuff here.
I think so too. I like to think so too.
Especially the component store. People, let's give the component store streams a watch.
Definitely. Yep. Actually, fun fact, when I got Chow invited first time on my stream, we talked about Automapper. And then afterwards, I saw a huge spike of people from Vietnam checking the stream. It's been the most watched video. So thank you, everybody from Angular Vietnam. I really appreciate you visiting me and sharing it. If you have any questions or want to know something about me, don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter.
Yep.
I'm also on Facebook, but I'm not super active. I recently started doing Facebook. So best is Angular, is Twitter or Angular Discord.
Yeah. For this demo, we're gonna stop here. But absolutely we can add more stuff like the authentication, right? The GraphQL auth guard, and how do we do auth in the GraphQL? And for the GraphQL, instead of like doing the include, I think we can do like a field resolver.
Yeah.
To actually fetch the comments on demand, or the on demand.
Yeah, you can definitely do these things more dynamically.
Yep. But absolutely, very, very nice. Thanks for introducing me to this stack.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. It was a great session. And yeah, if you want to look at some more GraphQL stuff, I'm definitely happy to hop on and show it all out.
And let's ask if anyone has any questions. I know for a lot of Vietnamese folks, the English speaking, or we kind of go a little bit faster for them, for most people. I apologize, but to invite English speaking guests, we have to do it, and as in the IT industry, we would want to get better at English. So.
Yeah, I think also the benefit of having it in a live stream is that people can watch it again and they can put it maybe a bit slower, so it's easier for us to for them to understand us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely. For me, it's a big honor to be the first speaker on Angular Vietnam office hours. So that's one that goes into the books. And there, at least my wife says thank you to everybody.
Yeah. All right. So if there's no questions, I'm gonna stop the stream, and I'm gonna say goodbye in Vietnamese. Cảm ơn mọi người nha. Tại hôm nay maybe livestream có vẻ không biết là slow hay là nhanh, chậm hay là nhanh hay là gì đấy, thì mọi người cho mình feedback. Thì hy vọng là lần sau mình sẽ mời thêm được những cái speaker khác và những cái chủ đề nó thú vị.
Tạm biệt.
Yep. Tạm biệt. All right, I'm gonna end the broadcast here.